Wind energy has been the gold star of the environmental movement going back to my early childhood. But even before that, you can look to the writings and the works of visionary Nikola Tesla, who dreamt of harnessing the wind and the sun, producing electricity without the necessity of burning fuel. So then you may ask, what's going on when they're trying to build wind turbines and there's all this anti-wind stuff here, all these anti-wind protests? If you look to sites like DSmog, who focus on exposing the public relations behind the climate denial industry, they will also show you that groups like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, groups like Koch Industries, Koch Foundation, the Heartland Institute, in general, to wit, groups that are funded by petrochemical fossil fuel dollars, aggregate this money and pull it together to create public relations on behalf of those industries. And that includes anti-renewable energy public relations campaigns. In fact, according to an interview I heard with Naomi Oreskes, why that can be traced back to some of the large fossil fuel companies going back to the 1970s. And then have in your mind the reason why the mainstream media doesn't expose that is simply because they themselves have a lot of ties to those fossil fuel petrochemical industries. That concept I'm getting from my readings of Noam Chomsky. So PR tactic number one is the deflection, to take your eyes off of harms of fossil fuel petrochemicals and also, I would add, the nuclear power industry. So we rank wind compared with fossil fuel petrochemicals and nuclear energy. Common sense will tell you wind seems like the less polluting alternative. Look, think what you already know how power is generated. A nuclear power plant, you use uranium fuel rods, splitting atoms, heating water, to boil that water and then spin a turbine, generating a lot of nuclear waste, contamination, leaks, etc. In fact, that nuclear power plant needs a lot of water to keep itself cool. Coal and natural gas are very similar. You heat water to spin a turbine and generate electricity. So you can heat water to spin a turbine, burning a fuel or using uranium, or you can simply set up a wind turbine, harness the wind, and spin the turbine that way. Either way, you're spinning a turbine. One way uses no fuel, the other way burns fuel. Well, just common sense will tell you which is less polluting. Now, no one's going to feel good about themselves opposing wind energy for selfish reasons, so they need to take it on also that they are somehow defending nature. Well, a common one put out there is they're defending birds from the blades of the wind turbines. While there's some truth in that, it should also be mentioned the Audubon Society, premier defender of birds, supports responsibly sited wind turbines. What do I mean by responsibly sited? Well, departments of environmental conservation go through extensive siting processes, depending on the state and the nation, to site the wind turbines to avoid bird collisions with migratory birds. The Audubon Society and many others will point out that more birds are killed by collisions with windows, collisions with cars, tall buildings, cats. But the fixation, the PR against wind energy, also serves to deflect from the harms that fossil fuels are causing birds. The Audubon Society and others point out the heating planet is disrupting bird habitat, causing birds in one area to die off and everything to shift rapidly, difficult for them to keep up with. Also, you can look to the fossil fuels themselves. You can remember the large oil spills, the large oil slicks, and the birds having their feathers caught and the birds dying from those oil spills and oil slicks. There's also something called open oil pits that don't get as much attention, which birds get fooled into thinking they're bodies of water and they fly into them. Well, what about offshore wind? Again, opponents are going to try to now point out the harms to the aquatic life in the water. Well, I'd like to start off with the fact the Ocean Conservancy, if you look on their website, is working to have responsibly sited offshore wind. Also, I believe understanding the necessity that a heating ocean is disrupting all marine life. Ocean acidification related to the burning of fossil fuels is also harming marine life. The mercury entering the water from the burning of fossil fuels, the burning of coal. And again, remember, those coal plants need to also have a lot of water. They're heating up water to spin the turbines. But there's also contamination to the water from offshore oil drilling. Now, while I'm on the topic of offshore oil drilling, opponents of wind will say, well, those wind turbines, the platforms they sit on are then disrupting the ocean life, but so are the platforms that the offshore oil drilling is being conducted on. And indeed, proponents of offshore oil drilling will point out how those platforms can be used for marine life, fish, and so on to have some type of shelter. Well, the same for those offshore wind turbines. But that offshore oil drilling also contaminates the water. Again, there's also transportation of the oil spills, oil leaks, and there's so many other contaminations to our water being overlooked. Just think about Louisiana, the state of Louisiana. A lot of petrochemical industry there, a lot of oil and gas refining, plastics refining. There's an area called Cancer Alley. Yet the fishing industry is also quite robust there. So if you think about it, we're eating contaminated fish, contaminated from fossil fuels, petrochemicals, also contaminated from nuclear power and nuclear weapons testing. So this myopic focus on wind is distracting from that. There's also more mundane contaminations to the water. Agricultural from the pesticide use. Roadside runoff from the oil dripping from the cars. Riding motorboats and other type of gas-powered boats. Now, after deflecting from other industry pollutants to our waters and other harms to the fishing industry from fossil fuel, petrochemicals, nuclear energy, compared with wind turbines, the next concept comes down that wind is just a big scam. These turbines aren't really doing anything. That's what they claim. I don't believe that. These turbines aren't really doing anything. Well, one of the bases for that is the claim about intermittence. But before I get to that, I want to say people putting that idea out there, there's two motivations. One is disingenuous because they're trying to protect the petrochemical fossil fuel industries. And the other is genuine and that they're trying to say, look, we can't just keep powering the same hyper-consumerism, only switch it to wind and solar and expect we're not overloading our planet. Now that I would agree with, but all of the major environmental organizations who often get smeared, like Sierra Club, Natural Resource Defense Council, and so on, also would like to reduce the general energy consumption and the general amount of consumption in general. So intermittence, what people opposing wind try to claim is that, well, the wind isn't always blowing. So there has to be another power source anyway. Well, my understanding is offshore wind actually has a more consistent wind than onshore. But the solutions for that have been put out there for a long time as well, and that's grid connectivity and energy storage. So when it comes to grid connectivity, what we mean is, well, the sun's shining in one place, the wind's blowing in another. If we can just connect that grid, we can run the grid much more easily on renewable energies. Now, the other gold star besides connectivity is storage solutions. You've got batteries, you have pumped hydro storage, and then you have hydrogen fuel powered by wind or solar. And then finally, the gold standard would then be having your base load power or your more continuous power source being geothermal or some responsibly cited water-based energy like hydro. And here I'd like to point out that those advocating nuclear power is the base load. I'd like to point out that nuclear power, in addition to generating volumes of radioactive waste, it too requires grid connectivity and storage solutions because those nuclear power plants can't be ramped up and ramped down. And lastly, just musing on this scam idea that wind energy only exists out of some show being put on. Well, think about China. China's been maligned in the English-speaking media going back to the days of the British Empire. I don't need to tell you how Chinese are portrayed. So consider all these negative portrayals aimed at them since the days of the British Empire, the Opium Wars, and then ask yourself, well, would China really be building tons of wind energy if it wasn't actually generating power? If it wasn't actually generating usable power? And it's not just China. Wind turbines are going up worldwide. The more energy generated from renewables really does lower the amount of energy needed from other sources. Needed in quotes. Again, we're back to that idea of just endless consumption. So Stanford and many other sources have put out studies showing how we could get to 100% renewable using wind, solar, geothermal, hydro primarily. And you can ask yourself, do you want to listen to organizations like Sierra Club, Natural Resource Defense Council? Do you want to put your brain power towards thinking how we can create power, how we can scale back our needs of power, and generate it from non-fuel sources? Or do you want to put your brain power towards helping defend these industries? There's only so much activist energy to go around for us volunteers. So I'll wrap up with, I think one of the reasons why it's so easy to get people riled up against wind energy is a lot of them really don't like how these turbines look. But that's subjective. That's purely subjective. Any of us can say we don't like how something looks. When I first saw wind turbines going up, the modern version of them, I saw these towering, gleaming white turbines, looking to me like something out of science fiction from the 1870s or 1890s. They looked inspiring and hopeful. That's what I saw. Hey, I hope you found this video helpful and these bullet points for wind helpful. And I hope you found the video somewhat entertaining. And until next time, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you know when I'm putting up a new video. You're liking, you're commenting, and as always, peace be with you.